Welcome to Capitol Report, a weekly discussion with your elected officials on the issues and concerns that affect you.
Good evening, and thanks very much for taking the time to join us. I'm David Nicholas. The legislature does remain in recess for another week as we sit down on this Monday morning with our guest, but it was a significant week in the state capitol as Michigan became the 24th right-to-work state this past week. What is the economic and a potential legal future for Michigan? We'll be talking about that and more this week with Representative Rick Outman, a representative from and a Republican from Six Lakes, representing the 70th District. Representative, thanks so much for taking the time to join us.
Well, thanks, Dave. I'm glad to be here. I guess before we start, I'd like to give a much-deserved congratulations to the CMU wrestling team and Coach Borelli, and in particular, Jared Trice and Ben Bennett. Jared, of course, will be a three-time All-American for CMU, and Ben will be the first four-time All-American for CMU in its history. So congratulations, well-deserved.
We're proud of them as part of the campus family as well, and you being a former wrestler, it was timely to have you here at the time they're finishing up another successful season. So thanks very much for that too. I did want to start with a major story of this past week, and that was, as we said, the official start to Michigan's status as a right-to-work state. The debate and the divide really doesn't need much of a recap. It dominated the news late in 2012 and here into the early new year. Sure. I'm wondering what your constituents have been telling you about it, their reaction to it as the debate has gone on, what your vote was when the bills came up in December.
Well, I guess we'll start out with my vote. I did vote yes on it. And as far as comments from the constituency, most of my family are teachers, and so you can guess that they're probably the first people that call me. And we have a lot of discussions. My brother's also a mechanic at the Road Commission, so he's in a union there. What I've told my family, especially my sister, who is, she lives right next door to me, so I talk to her every day. But I said, you know, as we go through this right-to-work debate and vote and then passage of the legislation, you know, people like to label this as union busting. And what I've said to her is, I don't know that was the impetus for it, at least not in my mind. And you know, unions can say that, and maybe they feel that because a lot of what you think comes from your historical perspective. But what I've told her is unions have the case now. They have the chance to strengthen themselves by becoming more relevant to their constituency, to their members. A lot of Republican members, at least in the MEA, have felt left out. I can remember going to my first state convention and finding a booth that had Republican caucus of the MEA. And I said, really, guys? Who are you trying to get? They said, hey, we exist. We're not well represented. Maybe we're not heard from a lot, but we do exist. And they've been at the state conventions ever since that I've noticed. But unions now have the choice. They can sit and complain and try to change the legislation, or they can use this as a platform to strengthen themselves and become more relevant to maybe the part of their membership that they haven't been representing well. And what I've told my sister is, if I were you now, I would remain in the union. The union has served you well. You know that even though they draw approximately $1,000 a year out of her paycheck, I said, your wages and benefit package would be much less than that had you not had union representation. They've done you well, and you ought to, in my mind, you ought to remain a member. My brother, who is a road commission employee and a member of that union, I said, you know, I'm not so sure with you. From what I hear from you guys, you are not well represented by your union. They pretty much just take your dues, and they really don't help you out a lot. I said, that's a case for maybe going and talking to them now and saying, look, either perform well for us, prove to us that you are a value-added benefit, or we're going to get out. But it really doesn't have anything to do with busting up the unions. It has to do with the choice of employees to remain in the union or not be part of the union and not have it based on condition of employment. I mean, it's that simple to me.
I'm glad you brought up that example, because even outside of these immediate connections you have at a family level, it does bring up the question of unions outside of, as you say, the most prominent being the teachers, in looking at the other practice where local municipalities have had to go to unions for bids on work first, and those policies, prevailing wage, that has been on the books as well. What does this law, for those that haven't followed the debate as closely, is there a change to that provision? Are all of these things then off the table, or do some of those practices continue?
Are you talking about prevailing wage, that practice?
Yes.
Well, this doesn't have anything to do with prevailing wage, and that may be an issue we bring up later this term. But this does not necessarily affect prevailing wage. It really is as simple as giving employees the choice of whether they want to remain in the union or not. And again, as long as the union is performing well for them and it's a value-added benefit, there's no reason for them not to be in the unions. If I were a teacher, I would remain in the union.
The bill was one that the governor had said he wanted to avoid in the run-up to the election, and it did come up then in the lame duck session, as we know. It was signed by Governor Snyder as it was presented to him. Other priorities that the governor has had have not been moved on as fast as he has said he would like. From where you sit as a representative for an individual district, are there priorities from his office that you think should be moving faster outside of obviously what we've been talking about, or others that you think should be dealt with more in a deliberate fashion moving forward?
Well, you know, with Governor Snyder, and I really admire him. I think he is phenomenal. But what he is a CEO. And he's all business. I've told people before, I said, sometimes you get what you elected. And to me, what we were looking for was somebody outside of mainstream politics, somebody who, you know, I don't know that he cares whether you have a Republican, an R or a D Democrat behind your name. For him, I've told people he's got a B behind his name because it's all business. And, but one thing he has had to maybe learn to do within the confines of this new job is that he is a co-equal with us, not necessarily the CEO of us. And you know, we're just another branch. And so as he's got his agenda, each legislative branch has got, or you know, the legislative branch has got their own agendas, and again, even broken down even further, the House has a particular agenda and the Senate's got another particular agenda that they're trying to move forward. So we all have the same goal, I think, and that is to bring more businesses to the state, to bring more job opportunities for the people of Michigan. And so however we accomplish that, I'm not set on any one particular path, but I think the goal is everyone's goal. And so I don't know that I have any particulars that I think we ought to move forward.
I want to get back to the focus on how this could work specifically in your 70th district in just a moment. But speaking at an economic issues breakfast this past Thursday, the day that the law was officially put in place, the governor said, and I have the quote here, "We are not going to see companies saying that they came to Michigan because of freedom to work, because that would just be a, quote, dumb business on their part. They would simply be making themselves a target in terms of people protesting." So if you're just going to see it be much more subtle, you're going to see more businesses, more companies, more organizations looking at Michigan that will share privately, but publicly, that you're not going to see anyone stand up and say that they came for that reason. Wondering what your take is on the governor's take on how we'll see, and then extending that to how you see it playing out in District 70. Different areas of the state, different economic factors already in place. Mm-hmm. What do you see as the future in your district?
Well, you know, as far as whether businesses will come or not come based on right to work, what I base my assumption on is a lot of what Mike Finney, the head of the MEDC, has said. He said it isn't necessarily that case, but when they look at national organizations that place businesses within, you know, different locations, that is one of the key considerations. And it may not be the only factor. Obviously, there's infrastructure factors, which is a huge issue for us, and having the right workforce and having the skill set with that workforce. So I think we have that only because we have a strong manufacturing background, and we have a lot of people who have those skill sets that are required. I think that's going to be one of the leading factors too. But again, that was something that Mike Finney had said was a factor, and we might as well stack the cards in our favor as much as we can. As far as our particular district, you know, a lot of my district is agricultural related things, and you know, it'd be nice to have more manufacturing. Obviously, we lost Electrolux when we did, and you know, that had just a domino effect on our economy. And then with United Solar going belly up, then again another hit to our economy. So it would
Is there still a foundation there? Because I mean, United Solar went in where Electrolux was. That area was sort of refabbed to take on the new business. What about that area perhaps being laid out as a platform for another new business coming in? What is the future at this point?
We're looking at that, and I've also been looking at, since I sit on the Ag Committee, one of the issues that have been brought up is food processing in this state, and that we don't have a lot of processing plants. We ship a lot of our goods out of state, and then they return as marketable items. And what we would like to see is more processing brought into the state, and I think the Greenville area would be a great place for it. You know, whether it has to do with the potato industry, which is a huge industry in my area, or if it has to do with beef or whatever. But processing plants are something that would be nice to bring in. It's a little tough because you have to deal with DEQ and EPA regulations, and in my mind sometimes over-regulation, but it's something that I'm looking at. We do have quite a few manufacturing facilities, mostly tool and die in the Greenville area. We had a business roundtable a couple weeks ago, I guess, and I sat down with the owners and CEOs of these various tool and die and manufacturing plants, and actually what they thought was the biggest hindrance to them expanding their business is a skilled workforce. They said the jobs are available. The problem is kids that are graduating from high school, or even some that are graduating from college, they don't have the required skill set. They're on a college track as opposed to a vocational track. And we're working on that too with some vocational ed bills that maybe will alleviate some of those problems by maybe not requiring 2 years of a foreign language, maybe not as many math courses, or have math equivalents that pertain more to the industry. Something we're looking at.
That issue has been in play for some time. What would be a likely time lag should legislation like that go through to reformat some of those potential offerings at the high school level? How much time would we take to kind of then catch up the process and perhaps start having more into the type of workforce skills that you're talking about?
I'm not sure how long it'll take to do that, but we have the bills already drafted. They're already introduced. I'm sure they're in committee right now. I think some of them are left over from last term, but one of them is, I think, Representative Ed McBrooms from the UP, and the other one is Representative Joel Johnson from Clare. And I know that the manufacturing sector, and also even Pete Haynes is the superintendent from Greenville Public Schools, and he said time is of the essence. You know, if we can move them as quick as we can, because that would really help them.
How about Montcalm Community College in your district? Because that's been another source of the debate as to how flexible, how mobile the two-year community colleges versus the four-year schools can be, in a sense being nimble and on their feet and ready to adjust should things change. And sometimes those changes, as those of us that are in a higher ed setting know, can be slow to adapt. What is the reception you're getting from folks at the community college level in your district as to, you know, would they be quote unquote ready to go? I
think they would. I've been in close contact with Montcalm Community College and Bob Ferrantino, the president of Montcalm Community College, and actually my son attends there. It's a phenomenal place. It's a great asset to our community, and it is a community college, an institute of higher learning that does adapt well and quickly to the changing times, and then they are willing to do whatever it takes to be relevant and to promote a good workforce, or even again, college bound. I mean, it isn't just a vocational ed community college. I mean, they work hard to transfer credits to, you know, in particular CMU. So.
Anything else on the agriculture front? You being a member of the agriculture committee, and you say it is a very dominant economic factor in your particular district. Issues that were taken up right before the recess, or things that you're aware of that are on the docket for coming out of the 2-week break that will be moving forward in that committee?
Yeah, you know, the last presentation we had in Ag Committee, which was right before the break, was a presentation on county drains and how the drainage system works in the state. It is something that I'm very familiar with because I'm an excavator and I dig a lot of county drains. And it's particularly relevant in Gratiot County, where they've had a lot of controversy over some of the drains that they've dug, and how the drain code is laid out, and whether it should be as easy to implement the construction of a drain or cleaning of a drain as it is, you know, because it does go on people's tax rolls, and some people have no idea how much it can cost to live in a drainage district. So I think that's something that I'm going to look at, and I told Gratiot I would work closely with them. If they had concrete ideas that they thought they wanted to bring forward, that's fine, and I'll continue to work on that, because maybe we do need to kind of change the way it works. It can be pretty expensive, and a lot of people are kind of left on the hook when they get a huge tax bill, and they really don't think that they've got any value-added benefit out of it. So.
You're also a member of the Children, Family, and Seniors Committee in the House. Our guest a few weeks ago, Senator Judy Emmons, chairs that committee in the Senate, has made a primary focus the issue of human trafficking. And I'm wondering, has that legislation then fully made its way over to your committee on the House side, and what do you see as the prospects of that moving forward?
Yeah, it hasn't come to our committee yet. I did go to her, she had a presentation on that in the Senate chambers, and I attended that. Judy and I work very well together, and we try to support one another whenever we can, and that is an issue that is near and dear to her heart, and therefore it makes it near and dear to my heart. And I think that, you know, the Attorney General is behind this all the way, and you know, I think it'll move quickly through our committee and through our chamber, and there'll be some good legislation that comes out of that.
And then on its way potentially sooner, as she hopes, to the governor's desk also for consideration. There's also your presence on the issues in the Redistricting and Elections Committee, and wondering if there's anything that's on the docket there coming out of the recess. Redistricting is its own thing that we have dealt with coming out of the 2010 census, but in terms of election, as we look ahead to an off-year election or to 2014, is there any activity that's going on there presently?
Yeah, you know, now it's, instead of redistricting elections, it's called elections and ethics, obviously, since redistricting won't take place again for another 10 years. But that was definitely an interesting committee as a political neophyte, I should say. I had really no idea what it was about, but and I really didn't know that I should even be on the committee, having no political experience. But it was a good committee, and it was interesting, and I really enjoyed that redistricting part of it. That being said, with elections and ethics, we're trying to do a little bit of a cleanup bills and try to make all of the filing deadlines and various aspects of elections more uniform, instead of having kind of a haphazard system. But I don't know that there's anything earth-shaking coming out of there this term.
And to energy, commerce, and technology, same question. Do we look at things that have been dealt with, or that are likely on the immediate horizon once you folks reconvene?
Yeah, I think the big thing this term will be the choice issue, whether we should raise the cap to, right now we have a 10% cap on energy choice, and that is more industrial, and I guess it is just industrial. We don't really have a choice market for residential, and whether we open it up to complete choice or whether we completely regulate it again like we have in the past, that's going to be the big issue that's coming up, and we're taking a lot of testimony from both sides of the fence on that, and it's an interesting debate. Obviously, as a Republican, you think more for the choice. You think about competition driving down prices, but there are a lot of reasons why choice hasn't worked in the past, and we've taken testimony that people have presented saying that it really doesn't necessarily lower the prices. There's a lot of infrastructure that still has to be maintained, and so it's something it's an interesting debate. It's actually pretty deep, and you walk out of there just scratching your head, but we're going to wade through it and try to come up with the best scenario for everyone.
Well, you mentioned earlier the solar company that came in where Electrolux was, and that company did not make it, and we know that there's a prevalence of wind farms in different parts of the state. Mm-hmm. So as you look at it, or your constituents in the 70th District tell you, what voice do they give as to whether or not this is a market for the free competition or an actual mandate of perhaps going to 25 by 2025 as has been proposed?
You know, actually, Senator Emmons and I toured the solar plant right after I was newly elected. And as they were presenting things to it, and a lot of my friends worked there, and as they were presenting their business model to us and letting us tour the facility, the one thing they said was Spain had been their largest market share in the past, and no longer was because Spain had stopped subsidizing that particular sector of the industry, and so that Germany became their largest market share. And I said, well, then is it fair to assume that unless you are in a heavily subsidized market, you're really not viable yet? And he said that is a true statement. He said what it will do is bridge the gap between when we become, you know, prices, as we perfect the system, prices are going to come down just like computers did, calculators, anything like that. And there'll be a point where we can match grid price, is what he was saying, and that bridges the time gap. And but unfortunately, all of those markets have kind of dried up because of, well, especially in Europe with their economic turmoil. And so I don't know that solar right now is a viable option for us. Wind farms in Gratiot, they seem to be doing well. I toured them, sitting on Energy and Tech, obviously. The whole committee toured them. And again, they are a subsidized market, but they seem to be working well. They aren't. It isn't going to be the standalone energy system. I mean, what Craig Boer works for the energy industry in Washington, D.C., and I see him at when I'm at Tri-County Electric legislative breakfasts, and he said the interesting thing about the electric industry is they've historically always tried to put all their eggs in one basket. And you know, when coal was the market of choice, they threw everything at coal. When it was natural gas, they threw everything at natural gas. And he said, unfortunately, what that does is drive up the costs in that particular market every time. He said, you really need more of a comprehensive energy portfolio, much like an investment portfolio, where you have it diversified. And so he said, wind energy and even solar can be part of that comprehensive energy portfolio, but it won't be all of it. He said if the electric industry would spread it out and diversify, then as prices went up in one part of it, they could concentrate more on the other, but that would tend to keep prices down, and I think we need to look at that.
Well, just a few minutes left, but I guess that brings up an interesting point then. Does the 2025 proposal get to that enough? Does it set... It sets obviously a level that we want to reach by the year 2025. Does it get to a point where the subsidy ends and the free markets take over? Does it get to the aspect of a diversified portfolio? Or when you say we need to take a look at it, do you think that policy potentially needs to be revised if we're going to take a serious look at putting that on the books?
Mm-hmm. I think that if renewable energy sources become more marketable, I think that by their very nature, they're going to become more and more heavily invested in, and they'll become a bigger part of that energy portfolio. To mandate that, I think what will happen is you will drive up costs, and you will drive businesses out of the state. And you know, we put it on the ballot. The voters of the state said we don't want that. What the energy industry has told us is Getting that 5% mark was pretty easy. Getting to the 10% mark has been a little more of a challenge. We have to beat a 10% by 2015. They said we're on course to do that, but they said it's really been a challenge. And to mandate 20 by 25, I think that would really have a detrimental effect on our economy. So I would prefer not to see that. I think that we need to let it develop on its own, and as we perfect the system, particularly perfecting the ability to store that energy, because unfortunately you can't just flip a switch and make the wind blow or make the sun shine, and so it makes it tougher. Even the most reliable wind in our state is in the thumb area, and the reliability of that is only about 30% of the time, which means 70% of the time we don't have enough wind available to generate electricity. So we have to work on storage capabilities, and you know, I think the technology will come along, but and when it does, I'm sure it'll really change the scope of how we generate electricity.
Well, this, like so many other things, then have potentially a short-term and a long-term impact, and we're in that pause mode right now, at least in terms of specific action. But as the recess reconvenes and all of you go back to work, we'll watch the progress on all of these things.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us. Good to have you here.
Thanks, Dave.
And thank you very much, as always, for your time and attention as well. We've been joined by Representative Rick Outman from Six Lakes, the Republican representing Michigan's 70th District. Our program to be repeated late tonight and our overnight into Wednesday morning. And, of course, within a week, we get these posted to our website as well at WCMU.org. You can click on the TV button and then go to the specific link for Capitol Report. Thanks to all of our crew for joining us and making the program possible. I'm David Nicholas. We'll talk again.
You've been watching Capitol Report. Join us again as your elected officials speak to your concerns on current issues.